Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can even earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Spotify for Podcasters has made our podcasting process so much easier and even has options like Q&As and polls so we can engage with listeners. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
The following contains descriptions of physical violence, sexual violence, and graphic descriptions of autopsies.
Hi listeners, welcome back to episode 4 of TGIC podcast. Today we're going to do our second part of the Black Dahlia episode, so that's pretty exciting. We're going to get really in depth on all the different suspects and theories of this case. I'm Jillian.
And I'm Izzy. So, just a disclaimer, this is the part 2 of the Black Dahlia murder case. So, if you haven't listened to part 1, go and listen to that before listening to this, because we're just going to be like Jillian said, we're going to be going really in depth onto these suspects.
Alright, let's get right into the theories. There were two main, theories, I suppose, but it's a little strange in this case. There weren't really specific theories regarding suspects. I don't know why. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that is really weird.
I was trying to do research, and there was, as much as they had, information on these suspects and how they could be related to the case, there weren't a lot of, theories on how they, individually killed. I don't know if that
That's,
makes sense.
so weird. That's, that's so different than any other case I've ever heard of.
Alright, so I'm going to start with theory number 1. It's about a possible connection to a serial killer. So, they connected her case to the murder of Suzanne Degnan, I think is that how I say her name?
Degnan.
I'm not quite sure. But she was a 6-year-old who lived in Chicago. She was kidnapped from her home in Chicago and presumably murdered. I didn't do much investigation onto this case, but it seemed like she was pretty, basic, I guess, kidnap and murder case, but I'm not really sure what this is. But it seems to be her killer was connected to maybe have taken her to LA. So that's how it was connected to this case, I suppose. And also, her killer did something very similar to the killer of the Black Dahlia, where he, sent letters to different people in the case, maybe, I think it was the police, maybe, in this case, and they were worded very similar.
Oh, okay.
But they never really formally investigated it because, as that sounds, that doesn't make too much sense. It's not very plausible.
Not to mention, they're not very similar. We talked about one of the things in the last episode about how she had those, asterisk,
exactly.
shaped, cuts into her lower stomach. We're talking about, if it's a serial killer, that's probably their main, mark, right? And,
exactly. And also, this girl was 6, and, compared to a young adult, that's a big difference in, what do they call that? A serial killer's, type?
MO?
Yeah, they always go for very similar people, similar ages, similar appearances. And in this case, they just seem very disconnected, almost like the police are just grabbing for connections.
Exactly. I kind of hate it when they do that in, murder cases especially, because it's, they just try and, connect it to anything.
Exactly.
Different serial killers and stuff, even if it's not necessarily, even if the cases aren't even similar whatsoever.
Yeah, so that was never really formally investigated as, a connected serial killer case. And don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure the killer of Suzanne Degnan was convicted.
Oh, okay.
So that case is pretty open and shut. The second theory, it's not so much as a murder theory as more of a cover-up theory. So there's believed to be a lot of police corruption in this case.
Exactly.
We went over that a little bit last week, but we're definitely going to go in depth on that this week. And so a lot of the connections on this for police cover-up began with when one of the main investigators, I believe her name was Agnes, she was taken off the case like a day after supposedly arresting a suspect.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I don't think the suspect was named, but she apparently interviewed and arrested someone for the murder, and she was taken off the case the day after.
Ugh.
And it's believed that she was taken off the case because she was getting too close to finding out the truth.
Ooh.
And, like, this was such a potential theory, I suppose, that it was actually investigated by the grand jury for the Black Dahlia case in 1949.
That's really interesting. And, I mean, like, wasn't, like, Los Angeles, like, police department in the 40s and, like, 30s and 20s super corrupted? Like, I remember reading that somewhere.
Yeah, I think, actually, a lot of police were corrupted at the time because it just, like we talked about, a lot of the suspects had a lot of dirt on, like, police and prosecutors.
Yeah, they were kind of all tight-knit.
Exactly. So maybe they were just trying to lead someone away from finding out the truth and getting one of their friends in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely, like, a big deal. Like, it's not so much like a murder theory, but it's definitely a corruption cover-up theory that's really important and really relevant in this case.
Because, I mean, that could have led to, like, the murder of Elizabeth Short not being solved.
Exactly. Alright, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the suspects we learned about last week, beginning with Mark Hansen. Hansen was Elizabeth's friend, and he actually allowed Elizabeth to live in his home on several occasions between May and October of 1946. So that's, like, a lot in the year before she was murdered. And Anne Toth, who was his girlfriend at the time, actually shared a room with Elizabeth Short in a house that was close to one of his nightclubs called the Florentine Gardens.
Ooh.
Which I think, something about that
it just
sounded
doesn't
so
seem
weird to
right,
me.
yeah.
But then again, I think when I was thinking about his girlfriend, I was assuming, like, live in, and then I guess that was not a norm in the 40s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think I read that when I was researching. I was picturing it more as, like, she lived with him and, like, she shared a room with Elizabeth, but I don't think that was the case. I think maybe he, like, paid for wherever she lived separate from him.
Yeah.
The 40s, man. And then on January 8th of 1947, Elizabeth Short called Mark Hansen in Los Angeles from San Diego, where she had ran away to. And he is the last person to speak to Elizabeth.
Oh my god.
Like, I don't think there's a recorded person after that spoke to her.
Wow. Okay, also, settling our debate about if phones were actually a thing in the 40s from our last episode, I looked it up, and they were a lot more widespread than I thought. So, just a clarification.
Well, also, she called from San Diego.
Yeah, so.
To Los Angeles, so. Wait, so when were phones invented? I'm so confused.
I think they might have been invented in, like, the 1800s. I think it was a long time ago.
I remember learning about this, who, like, invented the analog clock. Hold on. We're doing a quick Google search for you in case
When were phones invented? 1876.
Wait, that's actually really early.
Yeah.
That's not Civil War, though. That's after the Civil War.
Yeah.
Okay. So, wow,
that's a lot earlier than
I really thought
Why
they were,
was
like,
I out here
new
thinking
in the
that,
40s.
like, they were, like, coming out in, like, the 1960s?
Yeah, so they spoke on the phone. He's, like, the last recorded person to speak to Elizabeth. And then during interrogation, he made several contradictory statements about when he spoke to her, how well they knew each other, like, so on.
That's just kind of sus.
It's really sus. Yeah. And remember when we talked about the package last week?
Yeah.
And how, like, it had an address book with his name on it?
Mm-hmm.
He claimed that the address book had belonged to him. And, like, I mean, I don't know if it was given to him as a gift and maybe he just never used it, but he says he never used it, and so he gave the address book to Elizabeth as, like, a present.
But, like, it had his name on it.
Wait, isn't that weird?
That doesn't make sense.
Especially because he very specifically said he gave it to her as a gift. You don't give someone a gift that has your name on it.
And, like, also, why would that be included in the package in the first place?
Yeah,
either he was being framed.
Well, it does seem very obviously framed because you sent a package with, like...
Like, you wouldn't be like... I feel like you might as well just turn yourself in if you're the killer and you put your name in the thing.
No, I just thought that was weird, but I also thought his regifting skills need improvement if he's going to give it to something that has his name on it.
Yeah, that's so ridiculous.
Piece of advice, guys, don't go around giving out presents that you got from someone else and have your name on it.
Yeah, that's just kind of...
I'd be offended.
That's so lazy. Like, I swear I've probably done something similar to that, but, like, it's kind of lazy.
Uh-huh. And also, there were no official charges ever brought against him, and he ended up just dying of natural causes in 1964. Theorists believe that Hansen could have had ties to gangsters. First of all, I'd like to say, I found this on a website, and I didn't want to, like, change the phrasing of that, the ties to gangsters thing, because
Gangsters?
I assumed that was meant to sound like that, but, like...
Like, not ties to gangs, ties to gangsters.
I don't know what gangsters mean. That sounds, like, really strange.
That's just, like...
Is that a phrase? Like, ties to gangsters? I don't know if this is,
know.
like, some sort of old-timey phrase. What does a gangster imply? Is this, like, a rapper? I don't...
Like, all I think of when I hear gangster is, like, you know those
Gangster's
costumes you can get at... Yes, that. But also, you know those costumes you get at, like, Party City, and it's, like, a fedora and, like, the striped suit and, like, the fake machine. That's what I think of when I hear gangsters.
So anyway, Hansen could have been a gangster, but there were no formal ties to him and the murder of Elizabeth Short.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm also going to talk a little bit about Dr. Patrick S. O'Reilly again. He was the guy, if you remember correctly, kind of just a weirdo. He, like, poisoned or he raped, which one was it? He raped his secretary?
His secretary, okay, so this guy, I'm kind of just repeating myself, this is basically exactly what I said last episode, but he literally took his assistant, or secretary, whatever, to a motel and, like, almost beat her to death for no reason. Like, no reason.
That's so weird. Why would you do that? Okay, so this guy is like a creep and just annoying, and I don't like him. Much like I don't like any of these creepy white guys in this case because they're creepy white guys.
I mean, they're all just, like, breaking the law. Like, even if it's not for the murder of Elizabeth, like, they're all just bad dudes.
Mm-hmm. So he knew Elizabeth, as we said last week, through Mark Hansen. And he was really close with Mark Hansen, and he often went to the nightclub that he owned, and this was all around, like, the time of the murder. They are assumed to, like, have partied often together. He also had a history of violent crimes with sexual motivation, as we just talked about, and I don't know if that means just like the thing with the secretary, or if there were other circumstances.
I mean, there might have been other circumstances.
A lot of times, too, if there's other circumstances, when someone was a minor, they won't be, like...
recorded?
Yeah, or, like, not shared specifically. And, okay, this is so strange to me. His right pectoral, so this is, like, his man boob, had been surgically removed.
Like, I just don't understand.
I don't understand. Why just your right one?
I mean, maybe he had, like, breast cancer, but, like...
It says it had been surgically removed in a similar way that was, like, Elizabeth Short was mutilated. Isn't that weird?
So, like, someone attacked him on the street and was like, I'm gonna cut your right man titty off.
No, I think maybe he cut his own man titty off. This is what, when I read it, I imagined that he cut it off himself, and that's why it sounded like he had ties. Because, like, they said, like, the way it was surgically, like, removed was similar. So I assume that means whoever cut them was the same person, and, like, you know, that kind of made it more suspicious.
Well, wouldn't he be like, this guy cut my boob off?
Exactly, so that's why I think maybe, like, it's
he
assumed
did it
he
himself?
did it. Yeah. Clearly this man was unstable.
I mean...
And then also, relating back to the corruption theory, he was actually once married to the daughter of one of the LAPD captains. So, like, he was in the family, I guess.
Yeah.
So, now Izzy's going to talk a little more about George Hodel, because he's, like...
There's, like, so much stuff on this
He's literally, like, the main guy. He was never formally convicted, but he's basically assumed to be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much stuff against him that just points to the fact that he was most likely the one who did it. So we're going to start with his background. So he was born on October 10th, 1907 in Los Angeles, California, and he died on May 16th, 1999 in San Francisco. I think he died of natural causes, like, it was never really clarified, but that's what I'm assuming. He had 3 children, But, like, one of them was, like, never in the picture. Like, he wasn't really a father figure. I mean, he was never really a father figure to any of his kids, but, like, the third one was never really mentioned. But he had two main children, Steve Hodel and Tamar Hodel. And Tamar has passed away. But his son Steve was a LAPD homicide detective. And he has literally spent the entirety of his career and of his life investigating his father for the murder of Elizabeth Short. Like,
you're kidding. That's insane.
Like, he knows it's him. Like, he's written, like, 3 books on this. He has, like, a whole website. Like, it's crazy.
What? That's... For, like, to have your son turn on you, what did he do to his son?
Well, actually, like, I'm gonna get into that a little bit later, but, like, he was really horrible towards his kids.
Wow.
Like, really horrible. Okay, this is really crazy, but this guy was, like, a genius. And if you, like, go back to the last episode when we talk about, like, the murder of Elizabeth, like, how she was murdered, it was very thought out. Like, it was very meticulously planned, and it was just, like, the person who killed her was very, very thorough. So actually, George Hodel graduated high school when he was 15.
I'm 15. I want to graduate high school.
Yeah, he was 15. So, and then he ended up attending California Institute of Technology, and he was expelled after his, like, first year because he had an affair with a professor's wife.
Oh my god.
Not only that, he got her pregnant.
You're kidding.
No, he was like 16. He got her pregnant. And he was like, okay, I want to have a life with you. We should raise this child. And she was like, no, you freak. I'm leaving. And she left him. We don't know where that child is now. We don't know if she got an abortion. We don't know what happened. But
it's like he didn't do it.
Yeah. Oh my god. But yeah, he literally that ended up destroying her marriage. And it basically like...
Oh my god. So you're telling me at 16... He's already graduated high school, he goes to college, and then he gets kicked out after his first year at the age of 16 because he knocked up one of his professor's wives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird dude.
Yeah, very weird dude. So now we're going to talk about his adult life. So in, like, the 1930s, there's never, like, a specific year, he married a model named Dorothy Anthony, and they had a daughter named Tamar Hodel. And in 1932, he graduated from Berkeley for pre-med, and then he attended the University of California to get his medical degree, and he got that in 1936.
How did he get back into school after getting kicked out of one?
I don't know. This was
some
like
sort of record.
I think this might have been like a really long time after. Like I think he waited a really long time. But yeah, and so he ended up getting like divorced from Dorothy, and like. That'll come in later, but yeah, he was divorced from Dorothy like a few years later. So he was an American physician, and he specifically studied venereal diseases, which is like STDs. Yes, oh STDs and STIs. And he was like kind of the face of STDs in America at the time.
Wow.
Like he did all the advertising and all this stuff, and everyone was like, just knew who he was. And, with that, he also started to, like, perform illegal abortions on women.
Interesting.
Yeah, and, like, at the time, like, all this stuff is very hush-hush, like, very taboo. Like, nobody talked about it. It was just, like, kind of just, like, something that was just, like, hidden from society.
Yeah.
And he was kind of, like, trying to change that in a way. Like, he wanted to make it more widespread.
Well, I guess that's not bad. That's the first thing I have not disliked about this guy.
Exactly. But, yeah, so these illegal abortions that he did were usually, like, botched or not done very well.
There he goes, messing up the one.
Yeah, and they were done in, like, places that were just, like, not sterile. Like, they were dirty.
Well, if he couldn't do it in, like, a hospital because it was
not allowed. Like, where were you going to go in the 1940s? Like, the wharf? I don't know.
The wharf? What's a wharf?
It's like where, like, in San Francisco, I don't know if they have one in Los Angeles, but, like, it's like where all the ships come in.
Oh.
Why would
you go there?
I don't know.
For, like, the ocean? The wharf just sounds like a fancy name for an ocean.
Yeah. And this guy was, like, he was highly fascinated by, like, the darker side of surrealism.
Is that art?
Yeah, it's like a type of art. It's like, there's like a famous artist who did, but it's like scary art sometimes. Like it's like, yeah, I don't, like Goya, that's surrealism. If you look up his art, it's like blood and stuff. It's sketchy. So that meant that like a large majority of his friends were like artists and models and musicians. Like this guy had connections everywhere. And I mean, I guess another large majority of the like reason of that, like he became like the party man of LA.
That's just so weird. I feel like this guy's involved in everything.
Like literally everything. And like these parties were sex parties. And, like, literally everyone attended them. Like, there were hookers going to those. There were police officers who were in the LAPD.
Corruption.
There were prosecutors and lawyers. And it was just, like, super sketchy. Like, there were so many people there that he probably had so much crap on. So, yeah, like, he was just kind of a psycho and, I don't know, he was just, like, obsessed with, like, the darker sides of things, like...
Oh, so, like, something a murderer would be interested in?
Exactly.
Yeah, this guy is really...
Yeah, he's just very interesting.
Wow, really suspicious.
So, in 1940, he married his second legal wife, named...
Wait, what does legal wife mean?
He married... he quote-unquote married a woman, like, before, like, his other wife, too. And it was, like...
Not legal?
It was not really legal. Yeah, like, they didn't do all this stuff or something. Like, it's kind of irrelevant. That's where he also had his, like, other son, who nobody really knows about, and who he wasn't a part of his life or whatever.
Okay, that's weird.
Yeah, so this second legal wife was named Dorothy Harvey.
Dorothy again?
Yes, another Dorothy. And because of this, he didn't want any confusion. He nicknamed her Dorero.
You're kidding?
No. Dorero.
Like Dorito?
Like Dorito.
All I'm hearing is Dorito.
Yes, so Dorero. So he lived in his giant, like, LA mansion with Dorero, his ex-wife, Dorothy.
She lived there too?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know. His son, Steve, and his daughter, Tamar. So, like, his children were, like, so commonly exposed to, like, all of his partying and drug use and these, like, giant orgies.
Oh my god.
And, like, they were, like, our age, maybe a little bit younger, like 14, 13.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so, like, all this wasn't sketchy. And, like, going back to Steve, like, you were asking, like, why would he, like, do this to his father?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, George always kind of looked down on Steve. Like, he thought Steve was weird. Like, Steve was really interested in school and, like, and all this stuff. And, like, he was never interested in doing stuff that George wanted to do.
Yeah, well, because what George wanted to do was freaking weird.
Yeah. But then Tamar was very fascinated by all this stuff. Like, there's a story about Tamar when she was about 13 or 14. She used to sit on the steps outside of their house, completely naked. And she would pose like a statue.
Why?
For onlookers. I don't know. But, like, her dad, like, he didn't encourage it, but, like, he was never like, hey, Tamar, you can't do that.
That's weird.
Yeah, so, like, this girl was, like, a little bit weird, a little bit eccentric. Yeah, she was just always really interested in the parties. Like, she always wanted to participate.
Oh.
Yeah. So, while he was married to Dorero, he also...
Sorry, every time you say that,
I don't know.
it kills me.
Dorero was, like, the most weird nickname ever, but, like...
Because it sounds like something they'd serve at Taco Bell.
Yeah. So, Dorero was bisexual.
Okay.
And George would always bring home, like, other women. Like, he would always have flings or, like, short relationships with other women. Like, it just wasn't weird. Like, him and Dorero would often have, like, threesomes and stuff.
Okay.
But another thing, because of this, a lot of people claim that he had a relationship with Elizabeth.
Huh. I mean, that would make sense, right? They, like,
Yeah.
party and stuff, right?
They, like, partied together. She was with Mark Hansen. Like, George Hodel went to his club. Like, they all attended his parties. Like, it was just, like, everyone in this case is so connected.
Yeah.
And, so, yeah, it's thought that he had, like, a relationship with Elizabeth. And if you think about this, like, that's probably how I'm assuming he's the killer, so I'm just gonna say he probably got her, like, personal items, like, knew a lot of stuff about her, probably, like, her schedule. And then also, he had a bunch of pictures of her in his house.
Huh.
Like, Steve Hodel found these pictures,
so
and they're
weird.
on his website, but it's just, like, it's just weird. And, like, going back to his kids, this is just, like, showing how freaking awful this dude is. So, when Tamara was, like, 12 or 13, like, George was like, I'm gonna give you a present when you're 16 that nobody else can give you. Like,
We talked about this in our last episode. That is so disgusting.
and so she was 14, and he basically raped her. He drugged her first, I think, and then he raped her.
That's disgusting.
And this was in, like, 1949. And that's also when he came onto the police's radar.
Yeah.
Because, like, he was arrested and he went to court and he ended up getting acquitted. But, like, it was incestual rape. Like, it's, like, that's, like, nasty.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since she was so young.
Okay, well, it's still bad no matter how old
Yeah,
she
but,
was.
like, still, I don't know. And then another really weird thing happens. His secretary, Ruth Spalding, was found dead. She had died of a supposed drug overdose. And he was suspected of, like, being involved in this. And let me tell you some of the facts about this. Ruth Spalding, like, I think she was, like, a middle-aged white woman. Like, she was, like, back then, like, women doing drugs in general was, like, not common.
Yeah.
And apparently, this is, like, the theory about this. She uncovered a bunch of dirt about George, like, including him overcharging his patients and, like, taking all the money for himself and, like, doing these botched abortions and just, like, all this stuff, like, that was really bad. So he killed her. And a lot of people thought it was so weird because, like, she had never been someone who would do drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, someone who's never done drugs is, like, not very likely to overdose by themselves. You know what I mean? And, like, additionally, he had access to drugs for multiple reasons. First off, he was a freaking doctor.
Yeah.
And he was, like, he knew some shady-ass people from, like, his party scene.
Gangsters?
He could have been, like, yeah, gangsters. He could have been, like, hey, man, hit me up. I need some, like, drugs or whatever. But, yeah, so, like, he was, like, I don't know, he was suspected of this, but, like, nothing was ever, like, taken further.
Corruption.
Literally corruption. Like, this dude could have been in jail already before all of the Elizabeth Short stuff happened. So, let's get into how he's involved in the Black Dahlia murder. So, I previously stated that it's possible that, like, him and Elizabeth had a relationship.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's not really clear how much before the murder this was. Like, I don't know if this was a year before. I don't know if this was a week before. Like, I'm not really sure. And, like, some other stuff is the fact that he was a doctor. He had medical training. A lot of the stuff in her autopsy and the way she was murdered, like, points to the fact that whoever killed her was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And he also had, like, a history of being super violent with, like, people, like, he knew, like, his girlfriend, Dorero, or wife, not girlfriend. He, like, apparently really badly abused her. And then also his children.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, so he was just, like, known to be very violent and kind of twisted. Like, clearly this guy was
Interested in,
psychotic.
like,
yeah. And he also lived really close to the crime scene.
That's weird.
Like, within a 5-mile radius. Which is, like...
Convenient enough to, like, be nearby and, like, you know, drop off the body or whatever.
Exactly.
But also not, like,
so close.
in his backyard.
Yeah. And then, like, she, like, the way she was killed was very alike to some surrealist, like, artworks.
Like he was interested in?
Yeah, like he was super interested in, especially one of his, like, favorite artists had, like, specific artworks that were, like, very, very shockingly similar to, like, how she was murdered.
That's too coincidental.
Like, the way she was positioned and, like, how she was, like, almost like how the killer took care to make her look, like, cleaned her up and, like, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then also, like, this is the weirdest thing. The police department ended up bugging his house. And they
bugged his house but never convicted him of anything?
Exactly. And on the tapes, they heard, like, screaming women and, like, a conversation that he had about, like, even, like, nobody's ever gonna even solve the, like, Black Dahlia case.
Oh my God.
Like, all this stuff, and, like, they never convicted him. Because, like, I'm assuming they were scared they were gonna out him. Or he was gonna out them.
Yeah. Corruption. It's honestly, the police thing sounds like they, like, bugged his house to, like, maybe, like, seem like they
like,
were
cover
doing
their
something.
asses.
Yeah. But, like, I don't know.
Like, he was never even taken in for freaking questioning.
Yeah. He really seems like the guy to me, and he died before he could get convicted.
Mm-hmm. But there are still people who are doing research on this case, like Steve Hodel. He has, like, a crap ton of books on this, like, so much information that's, like, literally putting George Hodel as the murderer, so.
Unfortunately, because the majority of the people in this case are dead, Elizabeth Short's never going to get her justice.
I know. It's sad. Okay, well, this was part 2 of the Black Dahlia murder. We hope to see you guys next week.